Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Warwick District Council Housing Scrutiny Committee meeting on Monday, July the 6th at 6 p.m. in the Council Chamber at the Town Hall in Royal Leamington Spa. Please be aware that this meeting is being live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel. Please also note that as part of this Council's commitment to reducing the use of paper, councillors and officers may be using electronic devices during the course of the meeting. My name is Councillor Peter Phillips. I'm Chairman of the committee. Alongside me on my right is Darren Knight, Deputy Chief Executive. To my left, Graham Leach, who is Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer, and Kelly Barnard, Scrutiny Officer. In addition, we have Christian Melgard, Interim Head of Housing, Paul Smith, Business Development and Change Manager, Jen Morrison, Project Manager, David Elverton, Strategic Director, Dale Duffy, Policy Performance and Complaints Manager. Who am I missing? Nicola Hobbs. No? Yes, Housing Strategy, Policy and Enabling Manager. I thought I was missing one. Have I got everybody here? Yeah. Also joining us this evening is Councillor Melrose, the Portfolio Holder for Housing. And I'm very pleased to also welcome Damien Roche, who is from HQN, who will be leading on one of the items on the agenda. Emergency procedure. There are no planned tests of the emergency alarm. If the alarm does sound, everyone present must leave by the designated exit route. If the preferred route is blocked, use the nearest signed alternative route. Do not use the lift. Everyone must assemble at the designated point, which is the central reservation in Regent Grove, in front of the police station. Members of the public and press should report to a member of the Town Hall staff who will be wearing yellow fluorescent jackets. Councillors and officers report to myself. Please do not re-enter the building until the fire officer advises that it is safe to do so. Finally, I've been asked to remind councillors and officers that when using the mics, please do not place any equipment such as your laptop in front of the mic because it will affect the mic's effectiveness. Please remember not to turn away from the mic when speaking. Pre-scrutiny Q&As have been published on the Council's website. I think they were largely, not entirely, from Councillor Syson. I hope you've all had a chance to read that. Before we get into the meeting, because we've got Mr. Roach from externally, and we've got other officers who need to leave at different times through the evening, alter the order of the agenda. So we're going to take, members who may want to note this just for avoidance of confusion, we're going to take item 1, then 2, then 3, then item 6, then item 5, item 9, item 10, item 7, item 11, then item 8, and finally the work programme, item 4. With that said, apologies and substitutes. I've received apologies from Councillors Barton and Jones and Councillor Davison, the leader of the council. Have we got any other apologies? And we are also joined by Mr. Dark, Phil Dark, who is the interim asset manager. He's just joined us. So, declarations of interests. Members, do you have anything to declare in respect to the agenda? No interests, declaration of interests. So we've got to confirm the public minutes of the meeting held on 27th of May. Can I have any questions and comments, please, if there are any? Silence, I take to mean there aren't any. Okay, I need a proposer for the minutes, please. Thank you, Councillor Dixon, and Councillor Bode seconded. Can I see a show of hands of those in favour, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. And let's move on to the substantive business of the agenda. And we're going to start with item 6, minor revisions to the complaints and compensation policies. Mr. Duffy, I believe you are going to lead us on this.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides members with an update on the Council's complaints framework and seeks comments on minor amendments to the complaints policy and remedies and compensation policy. The changes are largely driven by recommendations from the Housing Ombudsman's March 2026 review of the complaints policy and updates to the Ombudsman's compensation guidance. These help to maintain a compliant and consistent approach to complaint handling. Thank you.
Members, questions, comments, suggestions? Councillor Dixon.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got a list of questions, I'm afraid. Bearing in mind that often we're asked to compensate for complaints that are made that are found to be at fault, and sometimes these are at the fault of contractors. I just wonder what measures there are in place to recoup the cost to the council for that compensation.
Mr. Duffy or Mr. Dark or Mr. Leach? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure you'd love me to say it's quite simple. We take it back off the contractor, but it depends on the contract which has been agreed and which is in place. It will vary from contract to contract, but where we can recover costs, we always intend to do so.
And just wondering whether that has been considered in the new repairs contract as well.
I think, Mr. Dark, that is yours.
Sorry, could you repeat?
It's just the ability of the council to recoup the cost of compensation that's paid when it's the contractor that's at error in a complaint.
Yes, we have provision within the contract for that. We're currently negotiating that a case currently.
That's good. The other thing, going down to, I think it was in 9.7 and 9.19 in the policy, talking about with the figures that there are responses outside of time scale, and that we are to be issuing weekly updates when a complaint hasn't been dealt with within the timescale. I'm just asking if it's possible that that goes onto our dashboard, that's reported to us as part of the our report, so that we can keep an eye on, as well as the amount of time that it is taking to manage complaints. You know, what's been done in the meantime.
Mr. Duffy.
Yeah, that's okay. I think in terms of what's happened with stage 2 complaints, we have a mechanism now where we send out a weekly email to everybody awaiting an investigator, and everybody whose complaint is being investigated gets weekly updates from people in my team or myself, depending on who's investigating the complaint. But yeah, we can make sure there's some form of reporting around that as well.
Thank you, that would be useful. And I just want, it was a suggestion, if possible, that we are now acknowledging complaints, all levels of complaints when they come in. And I'm just wondering, as part of the confirmation, can we confirm with the complainant their preferred mode of communication? Just from experience as a councillor, often people are not maybe receiving a phone call, they've missed phone calls, or they have missed an email, or you know their phone is unreliable anyway, so it's perhaps not their preferred mode of communication. But also, as well as that, just as good practice really, confirming their preferred title, name that they wish to be known at, and just to make it a bit more of a friendly and user-friendly experience.
Thank you. I can't be 100% certain, but I am fairly sure that the housing complaints team do collect that information and speak to complainants to find out what their preferred contact details are, or contact method, sorry. And recently we've been looking at introducing the council's complaints process into the CRM. And as part of the workshops for that, that was one of the questions that's been added to the form. So once that's ready, that will go out, not just for housing complaints, but corporately as well.
Thank you. And then just finally, how confident are we that we have responded to all of the Ombudsman's concerns with regards to the complaints process?
Again, not 100%, but almost. And I need to send the revised policy back to them for their final consideration, but they don't want us to wait until it's approved by Cabinet. They need us to do it, I think, by the end of this week. So I'll send it back after this meeting, and we'll await their feedback. But everything that they said that we needed to change has been updated in our policy.
Councillor Bird.
Yes, I'm not sure which report was bringing us. I've read such a lot today. But the one thing that did stand out was on the complaints procedure, how long they were taking. That we weren't actually hitting the deadlines. And it's quite a lot were going well past, particularly stage 2 complaints. And I'm just wondering what are we going to do to pull it back? Because it's clearly important and is monitored and we're measured. So it should be right.
Thank you. At stage 2 at the moment, we've recently, well, I say recently, it was December, January last year, this year, where I ended up with 3 more positions in my team. So I now have 3 policy performance and complaints officers working with me to help with resource for stage 2 complaint handling. The big problem that we're seeing is the number of complaints that are coming at stage 2, and they are out despite us improving the rate at which we're responding to them. So I think we've gone from 8 in April to 12 in May to 11 in June, and we've already done 3 this month so far. They are coming in so quickly that we are struggling to keep up, but we are looking between myself and Mr. Leach at other options for addressing the larger volume of complaints that we're receiving.
There's a follow-up on that in terms of resources. Councillor Melrose, yes, you want to?
I think as well as the new resources, it's also trying to reduce the amount that's coming to stage 2. It's about themes. Is it not doing enough investigation? Is it the quality? That sort of thing. So I know part of Mr. Duffy's role is to try and train obviously the stage 1s about making sure they're the quality through. So we reduce the amount coming into stage 2. So there's a 2-pronged attack.
When can we, the reports were based in March, I think, where they're measured from. When can we get the next report? Because March is a long way back. And we need something reasonably soon to see whether there's been a change, because we do need to implement a change.
Mr. Duffy, when is the next report scheduled for then? Or are we doing, I would hope we're doing monthly reports by the sounds of things, if not weekly.
Yes, so we have weekly complaint reports that go to officers and are shared with the leader and portfolio holder. But the next complaints report should be due, it will be, the annual report is in production now, so that will be everything from last year, and the first quarter report will be coming around August, September time to Housing Scrutiny Committee.
Mr. Leach.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. The bit I'd add to that is that obviously within your monthly report, each report that you get in terms of compliance actions, there is a bit in there about complaints and progress on stage 2s as well. So actually, as Housing Scrutiny Committee, you're seeing this far more than most of the members are as well. And it's also seen by the Consumer Standards Compliance Board as well every month.
Any comment, Councillor Bode?
Only we need a report, and the report needs to show progress. If it doesn't show progress, we needn't have the report.
Well, I think we need to know if there's no progress. So, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm just looking at the work schedule, which I know we normally do at the start, and we don't actually have an update on the complaints scheduled beyond this that I can see. Our quarterly complaints in December, and then one in September. So will you be ready to give us an update in September?
Yes, we can give you an update in September.
Okay, thank you. So we'll have a better view then. Yeah, but I think you understand our concern about this, and I'm pleased to see Councillor Melrose is also aware of that and agrees.
I will take it back to the leader as stage 2 complaints sits with him as well.
Thank you. Any other members for comments? Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Chair. Quite a few, 25 recommendations in all, and I wasn't sure if it was answered by Councillor Dixon's question earlier about whether, obviously, the revisions have gone into the draft policy, which is going to the Cabinet, but have all 25 recommendations been covered, or any that were particularly tricky or been put back, or, yeah?
Yes, every recommendation has been covered, so I in process-wise, I worked through their spreadsheet and took their comments on board and added them into the policy. So yeah, they've all been incorporated.
You okay? Yep. Anybody else? I think, no, thank you, Mr. Duffy, for the work you've done on this. And I know it says minor revisions to the complaints, and it is actually relatively straightforward. But members, we have to actually vote on this recommendation. I think the report's a good report, and the recommendation is that the Housing Scrutiny Committee recommends to Cabinet that the amended policies be adopted. May I have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Dixon, and a seconder, Councillor Bode. Can I see a hands of, show of hands all those in favour? That's unanimous. So thank you, Mr. Duffy, and very pleased for you bringing this forward, and it will go to Cabinet later this month? Yeah, okay, the 22nd July meeting. Thank you. Right, with the amended schedule, we now go from item 6 to item 5, which is the HQN Consumer Standards Action Plan Midpoint Report. Very pleased to have you here, Mr. Roach. And would you like to, I don't know, Mrs. Smith, would you like to introduce the report and then pass over to Mr. Roach?
Yes, Chair, just a very short introduction, if I may, before handing over to Damien. So this report provides members with the findings of the Housing Quality Network's independent midpoint review of the Consumer Standards Improvement Plan. Overall, we think this is a strong report, and that's supported by the fact that it's independently validated. I think the key message is not that every issue has been resolved, but that the Council has responded positively to the regulatory challenges and is now in a significantly stronger position than it was in 2024. So that said, if I may just hand over then to Damien, who'll talk through the report. Thank you, Chair.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'll try and keep it relatively short just to give opportunity for questions. Excuse me, just to introduce HQN, first of all, we're an organisation that have been around for almost 30 years now, working pretty much exclusively in the social housing sector, working with local authorities and housing associations. We've worked with many local authorities over the past 3 to 4 years, helping them prepare for the regulatory challenges that are facing you. And all the teams that work with organisations such as yourselves have got extensive operational experience in the sector. I myself have worked for a number of local authorities as well as housing associations, so we bring that to the table. And just to confirm, and I'm sure you are familiar, but what's the regulator seeking when they come in and so that they're not just looking at a performance report and ticking it off. They want to see that you can evidence that compliance. They want to see that yourselves as councillors are holding officers to account and that you are receiving satisfaction that the standards are being met. They want to see that both senior officers and councillors are hearing the tenant voice, so that the decisions you make are very much shaped by the views of your tenants. And ultimately, this is about outcomes for tenants. Yes, you want to comply with the regulatory standards, but this is about delivering excellent services to people in safe homes and delivering value for money in return for the rent that they're paying. That's what we're looking for. What led us here was that the council has been very open in terms of facing up to its challenges, brought in HQN, brought in another consultancy to carry out reviews around the consumer standards, as a result of which you picked up the metaphorical phone to the regulator and advised them that you felt that you were significantly non-compliant with the standards. As a result of that, you got a C3 rating in September 2024. You've implemented an improvement plan since then, overseen by a board and I sit on a number of similar boards across a number of local authorities. And I don't know if Darren's a glutton for punishment, but it is, without a doubt, the most significant external critical friend number of people on that board that I've come across. So fair play that there's no defensiveness, very much opening yourselves for that external scrutiny. And I like to think we definitely scrutinise when we attend those meetings. I think it's fair to say, as Paul said, there's been significant progress. The main faults found when you self-referred were around the safety and quality standard. That's fairly standard in the sector where organisations have self-referred. Tends to be safety and quality that is the big concern. It's clear that there's been significant progress. That's been verified by Pennington Choices. I'm sure you've received a report from them. Equally, there's been significant progress across all the standards evidenced by this midpoint review that we carried out. Just in summary, highlighting the improvements, the process in place is a strong one. Your own internal audit team has deemed it to be sound, so that's good assurance. Councillors clearly are engaged in overseeing compliance with the improvement plan. You've implemented a range of relevant policies and procedures. Stock condition, so the knowledge of your homes is much, much better than it was. You're still on a journey to get up to that 100%, but you've made significant progress. That's a critical expectation of the regulator. Linked to that is therefore your confidence that your homes, or majority of your homes, meet the Decent Home Standard. And again, you are working to achieve that 100%. We talk about the big 6 areas of compliance, so gas safety, fire safety, electrical safety, etc. Significant progress made in this area, such that in isolation, you're looking at by far a compliant aspect of the service. Obviously, there's lots of other areas that entail getting the compliant rating, but certainly in terms of what we call the big 6 compliance, you can evidence your tenants are safe in their homes for the most part. That's good. You've done a lot of work around engagement with your tenants, increasing opportunities for tenants to influence strategy and hold you to account for performance. And touching on the earlier discussion around complaints, we've seen significant improvements there. In terms of the challenges you're still facing at stage 2, as mentioned. At stage 1, though, for the last financial year, you were not far short of 100% responses within timescale. Complaints is an area that all housing providers are facing difficulties in, simply because of the sheer rise in the number of complaints. So significant improvements have been made there, which is to be noted. However, there are still challenges that you're facing before you can confidently receive the regulator again. Stock condition, they expect you to get up to 100%, but it's difficult. There are a percentage of homes where the residents are reluctant to let you in, so you need to go through a more rigorous process to encourage them to open the front door, shall we say. I know that there's a lot of work going on in that space to get there. You've also got a high number of outstanding fire risk assessment remedial actions. Again, we see this a lot across the sector, and whilst the numbers are quite high in themselves, it's clear that there's been risk assessment undertaken. So many of them are very low risk. Many of them will be about signage or things of that nature. Needs doing, but it's not something that is necessarily putting your tenants at significant risk. You've plans in place to address it. I know you've brought on additional contractors, so you're working through that. Responsive repairs is an ongoing challenge. Again, we see that in many organisations. You've made progress and then had hiccups, made progress and then had hiccups. Again, I know that you've recently taken on board fresh contractors, so hopefully you'll see steady progress in that area as well. And linked to that is the challenges that we're faced with AWAB's law. I'm sure you're familiar with the new law that's come in over the last sort of 12 months, requiring far greater rigour around addressing hazards in the home, such as damp and mould, but many other hazards as well. We noted progress in that area, but there's more work to be done. And that's it, really. So overall, just to summarise, significant progress has been made towards a compliant service. And what I would say is that the team, very self-aware, very open to that challenge. I made the point about a lot of external critical friends on the improvement board, and it's a very positive experience as a critical friend. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Members. Councillor Firth.
It's a great report, and it's really reassuring to hear that we're on an upward trajectory and that people are self-aware and open. It sounds really positive. I don't know if you're the right person to ask this question to, but there was one thing that stood out was, and I think it's happened a couple of times before, which is that in section 5, assessment of actions to achieve, there's this one bit that says that you're advised that some of these are administratively open. That means works are completed, but system not updated. And I'm sure, I just wondered what we could do to speed that up, or what reasons there were. I'm sure there's some super good reasons, and how we could close that gap so that we could look better.
I can give you a generic answer, because I've seen this in a number of organisations, and it might be that colleagues can give the specifics. Sometimes it's where we know the works have been done, but the contractor is lagging behind in getting the paperwork to you. That often tends to be the case with those administrative ones where we know work's been done. In terms of getting over those hurdles, it's just about keeping the pressure on contractors to follow up with the paperwork after the works have been done. Unfortunately, we know some contractors are better than others in terms of providing that verification. So I don't know if anyone wants
Would
to add
officers
anything.
like to comment on that question? Mr Melgard.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is something we are addressing with the incumbent. The team meet like daily and weekly updates with the contractor, looking at the data. We've recently updated our reporting to give more up-to-date, accurate reports from our system that we can then check against what the contractor's records. It is something we are going to look at with the mobilisation of the new contract as well. It is important that us, as client, as managing that contract, we're sort of working off the same information, drawing similar conclusions and working together on putting in place improvements. We do need to make sure that we are getting the most up-to-date picture, but crucially making sure that emergency repairs and urgent repairs, where there are any administrative questions, that we close those down either through checking with the tenant themselves directly and operatives and contractors, so that we don't have any gaps of where there could be a risk. But it is something we do need to make sure that we're on top of, because coming to the end of the existing contract, we need to make sure we have a good understanding of those jobs which are active, those which will be closed, those which could potentially be following on to the new contractor. But the work that the team have done with the weekly updates now, which we'll be looking at bringing into future reporting as part of the refresh of the performance assurance framework, just to give you a better sense of trends. So that we're going to take on board from what the committee have said and give you a bit more transparency around that reporting within the briefing note as well.
Councillor Firth.
Just a quick comeback question. Since you're reviewing the contract, is that something that you might work into the service level agreements with your contractors to say we need paperwork in within 24 hours of having completed it, so that you keep the records tight, if that's the main contributor to the data not being put on the system?
It will be part of the mobilisation work stream. We'll be looking at, we have an IT work stream to look at the systems that we'll be using, because again, that needs to be really clear and understood between both parties. And also making sure those service levels, again, clear to tenants, clear to us, and we're clear to what we're measuring them against. I know Mr Dart will be providing further information as we get into mobilisation phase, because there'll be elements of that new contract which will be very different from the previous one in terms of service levels, in terms of how we approach compensation and complaints, the customer care element. So I think there'll be more that we can sort of provide assurance on how that's working. But it is important for us. I mean, without the data, we can't do any of this. So it's vital that we've got that one version of the truth between ourselves. And so we've got a separate work stream as part of the mobilisation that will be working on that.
Councillor Harrison.
Yes, yep, good report to read through. I was just interested in a couple of points on, there was a term that was talked about, which was cloned data, and this is on Appendix 1 of the report, page 10, whereby, I guess this is about, whereby HQ are recommending cloned data won't be a suitable method. Well, to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming it may be a common design of property, and therefore, if you do an inspection on one, you might draw an assumption that you've got similar issues or you haven't got issues on others. But correct me if I'm wrong with cloned data, and the fact you're asking really should be physical checks. Does that cause issues? And I'm looking at the officers as well about more additional access to these properties is required. Therefore, and is that overkill, or is that kind of common practice? And I've got a second question on which is in Appendix 2. I'd be interested in the model household data strategy, knowing our customers, whether that's probably a second question, so I'll leave it at my first question for now. Thank you.
In terms of the stock condition, I think it's fair to say we've had some healthy discussions around this. So first of all, it's acceptable to clone data for the purposes of business planning, setting budgets and things of that nature. However, in terms of understanding the quality of the homes, the regulator is quite clear that they expect you to get into or attempt to get into 100% of your homes. The reason for this is, while, as I say, it's okay to clone data for the purposes of, say, budget setting to a degree, just because two homes are, if you like, structurally alike or same building, and it doesn't therefore follow that they are both in the same state, shall we say. So there could be any number of health and safety risks in a home that you've not managed to get into. And of course, some of your homes will have been built probably before the Second World War. So if you've not been in them in the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever, then who knows what might be inside those properties. So the regulator expects providers to get into 100% of homes, or attempt to, for the purposes of assessing the quality of the home and therefore setting your budgets for decent homes work and planned works to replace kitchens, etc., etc. However, there will be a percentage of homes where the residents are reluctant to let you in for various reasons. It could be nefarious reasons, as in the properties being cuckooed and, you know, the tenants being bullied to allow drug dealing to be taking place or whatever. It could be sublet, but it could be other reasons, such as the tenant is vulnerable and distrusts the council for no reason other than they are, if you see what I mean. And it's so there needs to be a flexed approach to getting into the homes as well. So yeah, so but essentially the expectation is that you get into every one of your homes, if at all possible, at least every 5 years, to do a full stock condition survey. Second question was, household data survey.
Yeah, I'll elaborate a bit more on that question. Yeah. The customer data, and it's probably more of a question for the officers about, is this quite a big undertaking as well? It's separate to quality. It's about customer data, profiles. There's various categories that we're required to record. And do we hold any of that data already? Is this a big undertaking? Is it quite a new thing, or have we already got a lot of
just by way of intro, again, there's an expectation under the consumer standards that you know your households. I have to say, in my experience of working with many, many housing providers, it's rare that I come across a process that's as rigorous as, say, stock condition surveys, i.e. looking at the properties. But one of our recommendations was developing this strategy to, again, try and get into every household once every 5 years to understand who's living there, what their needs are, because the idea is, or the expectation is, that you will flex your services according to the needs of individual households, not assume everyone, you know, needs the same level of service as everyone else. So, but before Christian may want to come in, I have to say, don't see the level of rigour, generally speaking, in the sector in terms of household data strategy.
Mr. Melgard.
No, just to add to that on the stock element, completely agree. I think just want to reassure members that our target for actual surveys, actual stock condition surveys, remains 100%. We will continue with the programme. We will seek to gain access to every single one of our properties and do that on a 5-year rolling basis. That is not going to change. We are now getting to the stage of kind of 85% plus actual surveys, which means slightly more about the people who perhaps aren't as minded to let us in, working across the teams to do that. While we will make some assumptions, which we did for the HRA budget and business plan, where there are, otherwise we'd assume no cost, which is not practicable. What we won't do is assume that all those properties that we haven't got into are fine, free from hazards, and perfectly the best condition they can be. Because until we get behind the front door, we don't know, we can't verify that. Hence the work on getting into each property. But that does dovetail with some of the work we're doing about expanded training for certainly all of the surveyors who are carrying out stock condition surveys. on the new housing health and safety rating system assessment methodology. And also, we are in the process of arranging training around AWAB's law as well, I think more for the layperson to understand risks and hazards in a property, so that we don't just rely on an official stock condition survey to bring hazards in the home to our attention, which we need to pick up. So I think it's part of, as we get more properties coveraged, if that's a word, we do want to focus on those where we haven't been able to gain access, looking across the teams where there are patterns with households who haven't let us in for routine repairs, electrical checks, gas servicing, so that we can narrow down and manage the risk. And secondly, and I'll ask if Mr. Smith wants to add anything to this, but I see the recommendation around the data strategy being just as important as the assets. I think we have a starting point with assets because that was the point of our self-referral. It's the area that we need to get right. It's the nuts and bolts, it's the basics of building up knowledge about our homes, but crucially understanding who is behind each and every front door. And as part of the work around resourcing, as part of target setting, as part of the work that we're doing with a risk-based approach to visits, getting the maximum amount of value from those visits, I will be looking, as part of our rollout this year, with clearer targets for being able to get around. Because I think it's minimum. I'd like to see every resident every year, if I could, with the resources. But setting out on a risk-based approach, who we haven't seen, where households have changed, where there's overcrowding, severe overcrowding, where there are hazards. So that getting right the basics with the assets and the homes. But the next part for me is key, is being able to evidence that from a household, from a tenant perspective, understanding who's behind those front doors and how we can support them.
You mentioned there that we try to see our tenants every year. Roughly what percentage of our tenants do we actually see every year? Approximately, is it 10% or 80%?
I think that at the moment, you're probably not far off that amount. I think we are doing a piece of work around
the 80%.
Yeah. So we'll see certain tenants more than once as part of engagement. I think there's a piece of work that we are doing around understanding who we've seen, what information has been collected, what we've got on our system, and using that to plan out the programme of targeted visits linked in with the other work we've been doing around no access in particular. So and that will be, I think, it was on, I think, some of the gap analysis we presented at the last committee about giving committee sight of where we are with that, what the approach is, which could be a form of the sort of data strategy about collecting information, but crucially information that's helpful, useful to us in supporting residents and helpful in tenants telling us where they might need different levels of service or adjustments, adaptations.
And I assume, maybe I shouldn't assume, do this, the difficult to access properties, do you tie that in with tenant visits, if possible, that the surveyors can come round? Or am I too optimistic there, that they don't want to see the tenancy staff either?
There are a number of reasons for no access. Sometimes it's just people want to be left in quiet enjoyment of their home. And I think there has been an acknowledgement, I think this goes across the sector, there's been a massive increase in the number of visits that have been required, particularly in older homes. And as an individual, as someone who is in their home, to have yet another visit, this time about electrical, this time about gas, this time about something else, I think it is important as part of our work with asset management that we can try and tie in these visits. And I know that that's something that the planned team have been looking at to try and reduce the imposition on households. That very often, well, I've done this and this and this, why do you need again to come into my home? There'll be those who have other reasons for not letting us in, but with particularly the work we've been doing, whether around some of the decarbonisation works, planned improvements, I think that's a responsibility on us to make that easier, to make that less intrusive for people, and to reduce the number of visits, and to try and do things where we can do first time and not have to keep coming back. So, and that's something else that we can pull into our approach.
And do we do weekend visits?
We've done visits, more so where it's been driven by a health and safety need, perhaps less so routine, but it is something you can look at as part of visiting people when it's convenient for them, which might be evenings, might be weekends, and I think we can pull that into our approach because it wouldn't be everyone, but there'd be a sizable number, I'm sure, that would prefer to have visits, or I can't do this because I'm working, I'm doing this, I'm that. But if you were prepared to come round, I'd be very happy to talk to you about the things in my home and what I need doing, or where you can help me with looking at moving home or whatever that is.
Yes, I did see you, Councillor Dixon. I thought I did. Yes, over to you.
Just a couple of questions, but the first one related to really what we're talking about, getting entry to properties. Is there training for those people that are making the visits on domestic abuse, safeguarding on cuckooing and exploitation, but also things like maybe hoarding and things like that, which would be perhaps a barrier to being invited in?
I know we have specific sort of training, essential compliance modules that we need to do. I think there is a separate piece there, absolutely right, around the sort of almost the housing specialisms of domestic abuse, cuckooing, hoarding, where there might be sort of mental health implications as well. Because I do see the role of, for example, our housing officers helping tenants and residents to sort of navigate to other services where it's needed. So I think as part of the work we're doing, looking at, for example, antisocial behaviour and other factors, is to look at, and as part of the work we're doing around sort of competent conduct and training internally, we did recognise it as part of the major work stream in the service area plan about sort of change and about the work that we're doing to strengthen various teams, including landlord services. We need to sort of pull in a programme there about what training support we're going to need. And also looking in the future, the more homes we get behind the front door of, I think we're missing a lot of data to show us what other, not just sort of spotting it and having your professional curiosity sort of piqued, but crucially, where we might suspect those sort of cases, what numbers are we dealing with? Because that's when we can look at what resources we need to address them. At the moment, I think there are data gaps that we need to bridge.
Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, no, thank you. And my other question would be, you mentioned the large number of fire actions that are responding. How does that compare with peer authorities?
It's an issue we see on a regular basis, I have to say. So it is a constant challenge because obviously you're carrying out fire risk assessments on an annual basis to meet the statutory requirements. So almost, as soon as you might clear a series of fire safety remedial actions, you've got a whole host more. So it's a constant battle. It's one that housing providers across the country are facing. So there's nothing different here in terms of Warwick's performance, should we say, but ultimately they are identified as actions that need to be completed. So so it's not out of the ordinary. It's a challenge many organisations are facing.
Okay. Any other questions or points? Then, Mr. Roach, thank you very much. We have to note this report, but before we do that, you've summarised very neatly for us the progress to date that you've seen. What confidence do you have that in our future direction? Are we going in the right direction? Is there more we need to accelerate?
Do you need to accelerate? Not. I suppose the sooner you get to a position where you're confident, you're compliant, the better, and the better for your tenants. But it's clear that over the period of the improvement programme that significant progress has been made. I think it's fair to say that when you self-referred to the regulator, you weren't in a great place. I think it's testament to the team that you're now in a much better place. Certainly in respect of compliance, you can be assured as councillors, based on the report that not just HQN produced, but also Pennington choices, that your tenants, you can evidence that your tenants are safe in their homes for the most part. I think you just need to keep the focus. You need to keep your eyes on the prize. I would say I'm confident you can get to a position where you can confidently have the regulator in, but it's just constant hard work. You're constantly running up the hill, and it's a long hill, basically. I don't know what metaphor that is, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I am confident you'll get there. You've shown the track record of achieving what you've achieved so far. So hopefully when I carry out my endpoint review, that'll provide you with further reassurance.
Okay, thank you very much for your time this evening. Much appreciated. We note the report, and I hope you have a safe journey back home.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, members. Now, as we are having just covered the external report from HQN, we're going to move on to item 9, which is the external report from Pennington Choices. I think, Mr. Dark, are you going to introduce this?
Start again, sorry. The report sets out since November 2023, the Council have satisfactorily completed 27 of the 32 actions in the plan set out by Pennington Choices audit. However, there are 5 actions that require additional measures to provide a full level of assurance. 2 of these are critical priorities and 2 are high. 2 of these actions, data validation and electrical certification, require further attempts by housing enforcement team and potential legal action to gain access to properties. 2 of the actions for managing follow-up actions and lifts and for Legionella and fire door inspections require the consistent adoption of the use of active H systems successfully used for other areas of compliance. The contract management action requires a further review of the scope of the Council's current systems or acquiring a third-party system to automate system reminders where time-based certification expires. And there is also a need to improve the recording of evidence of the completion of fire risk assessment actions. The action plan sets out a plan to complete these actions by the end of October this year, although it should be noted that in terms of getting access, this relates to having a full process and evidence of access attempts, as the legal action could extend beyond that for individual cases.
Thank you. Members, questions, concerns? Councillor Bode.
So with the work you'll be doing on the fire actions, will that reduce or eliminate what we were talking about earlier on, where we seem to be finding the problems but not concluding them? Even if it's put a sticker up that says fire.
Yeah, the findings with the case of this report was around the quality of evidencing of the actions, where the actions have been shown as being completed. It was around the quality of the evidence. So we're taking measures while we're going out carrying inspections to validate to validate that the situation is as reported.
So presumably you're finding where we haven't completed the works?
It's where we've recorded that the work's been completed, but Penningtons weren't fully happy with the record keeping on that.
Yeah, I understand that. We have an issue with fire, and we bring it up every now and again saying we have an issue with fire, we've still got outstanding items. Now, from the chap who was in last, where they were saying there are lots of identified actions but not concluding. Now, you're going around saying, I'm looking to see what one's doing, but it wants all the fire stuff to come together to get rid of it, because it just keeps going round. My view is it keeps going around in circles. There needs to be someone or some group that's got their hands on that.
I agree with you, Councillor Bode. We've been round and round the loop on fire safety for several times now, and I think you're on the ground, we're doing the work, the administrative side of it. I don't know we can give assurance to Cabinet that the administrative side is working at the moment. I think there needs to be a distinct focus on this. I think Councillor Dixon's raised it, Councillor Bode, and we've covered it several times before. I think, Mr Melgar, I don't know if you want to comment on this, but I'm not sure we can give the assurance we ought to be able to give on fire safety in terms of the administrative side. Yes, Councillor Bode agrees with me here. Perhaps you'd like to comment on Mr Melgar.
Yeah, I think one area, and we see from the updates we provided in terms of breaking all of the outstanding fire risk actions down by work stream, we've reduced month on month those legacy actions. I think the challenge that we've faced, and we have brought in more resource, additional resource, as well as recently refocusing task and finish group to the administrative actions, assigning different teams a number to work through and complete. It's staying on top of those new actions. While we have had a large number of new or refreshed fire risk assessments coming through in the last year, which has meant that we faced more actions than we will see this year and next. We recognise there's still a weakness in closing down actions. The key for us, and this is sort of learning from the past, is making sure that we have the audit trail and the evidence to say why those actions were closed. I think we've seen too much of a slowdown in the closure rate because of that. That's something in our control. Working with the teams, we've created like I said, a subgroup to work on those. We've set out some indicative timescales and numbers. We're working on an updated programme that we should have this week or next, because I completely agree, the pace of reduction has not been sufficient. We need to tackle that. We need to get those actions down and show that we can stay on top of the BAU actions which are being generated from the refreshed fire risk actions. And we need to do that over the summer before we get into to autumn, so that we can stay on top. So it's a focus for officers. It's a daily focus for officers, and certainly my oversight on a weekly basis to look at what we're doing and how we're showing that evidence. And if we do need to prioritise that even more over the coming weeks, we will do, because it's, for me, one of the top 4 priorities that we need to nail, alongside the work on stock condition, alongside the work on complaints, which we've talked about, particularly the work on stage 2, and the work with repairs, outstanding repairs, performance of repairs. So these are the things that I'm certainly making clear to our teams in terms of priorities. These are our number 1. We need to work through them, and if we do need resources brought in, if we do need a refocus from different teams to help collaboratively address these actions, we will. Because I want to see these come off, and I want to see us talk about other things. But until we do, that's on us to get done. So assurance that it is top priority. We are working on those actions. We will be reducing them, and we will be reporting back to committee on progress.
Councillor Bird, any follow-up?
Yeah, what is the timing plan for having done that? We're going to say by Christmas all the fireworks have been done? Perhaps November for the fireworks, so the work is actually concluded? Because we keep talking about it and juggling things around and keep talking about it. Your report on it's great because you're finding things, but we haven't got the other side of the argument to actually do the work. Seems to be the case. And we have various committee meetings on it, but what you want is somebody to go out and do something physically to actually knock that one off and record it through your system so you know you've got it.
Councillor Melrose.
Just to add that Cabinet pretty much echoed Councillor Bode's words completely. So every few months, Cabinet have a review of how, like, sort of the fire assessments and stuff. So it happened to be last week was our Cabinet one where, so I think it was Councillor Sinnott and Councillor Davison said the exact same as you. So it's questions that I need to take with Mr Melgard in regards to how we get into a better position. Like you said, we're closing off the actions because we keep finding, which is great, but we're not completing the circle and getting that tick because we're just going to keep growing and it'll just be forever. It'll be a forever ending project in that one sense. So Councillor Sinnott, I know, has taken a particular interest because of his background as a fireman. So he's wanting to just do a little bit digging deeper as well because he's got that expertise knowledge in some of them aspects.
Okay, Councillor Wyman, I do see your hand, yes?
Yeah, it's kind of on the same point, really. We've discussed at great length the fire safety measures. We've also discussed the stock condition surveys. The issues underlying it seem to be the same, really, in that we get so far, we're clearly making progress, but it's very difficult to get to 100%. And that is the requirement by the looks of it. We do need to get to 100%. We need to get access. When we've had these previous discussions, we've always sort of discussed, you know, is there kind of a limit to how far we can get through normal efforts? And the cloning of data was seen as the sort of way of bridging that gap to get to the 100%. The HQN report is now saying quite clearly in April that using cloned data to get to 100% compliance is not going to be acceptable. I'm not really seeing what is the strategy, because trying the same thing over and over again, to me, it strikes me we are going around in circles a little bit. We're making progress, but to get to 100%, if we can't use cloned data, what's the strategy?
And that applies equally to FAR as it does to stock condition, I imagine, yeah.
To be honest, it's the same, really, because it's getting access to properties, and there is a residual, I think, which is about 85%.
I think the fire safety one's a bigger issue than just getting access to properties. Yeah, Mr.
It's finishing off the action,
Yeah.
but I think the actual access to properties itself is an issue.
So if we haven't got access to a property to carry out a stock condition survey, but we have access and we have got a record of compliance and safety, then we have some assurance of the property, from the safe of the big six is safe because we have got that record. And I know that, if we're getting that access, then we should use that as an opportunity to carry out an actual stock condition survey, but sometimes tenants will still not let you go to other areas of the property. So, you may get in and they may allow you to go and check the boiler, but they might not want you to go into, all areas of the property. You would always want to be sure that you've got that record, because of that safety and that other compliance. That would be part of that process, and if that hasn't been explained before, I apologise.
No, I kind of get that. I just, seeing the HQN saying 100% compliance, in HQN's opinion, this contravenes the safety and quality standard and should be reviewed, the use of cloned data. Have we kind of accepted that we can't use cloned data now to bridge the gap?
Yeah,
Mr. Melgard.
as I said, sorry, yeah.
Mr. Dark, sorry.
But I think what HQN is saying is we can use it for financial planning in terms of, you know, using it for financial planning purposes. So we can use it for, you know, financial planning, sort of strategic planning, use it towards informing asset management strategy, etc. So you can use it for those particular purposes. But they're saying from a compliance of the property perspective, then what they're confirming there is the regulator is saying they would expect you to get into the properties to ensure that, you know, from a compliance of the property perspective. So the Big Six compliance is one thing we can potentially evidence because we have actually got that particular information. But you know, they're saying that you know, the HQN is saying there is still a risk. There could be other risks in that property. You know, housing, health and safety risks potentially in that property. So that's, you know, that's what they're saying, that we've got to be cautious around, you know, and pursue a route to get access in those cases. Still pursue that route to get access. But it's very challenging because the only route we would have to obviously gain access would be legal action, and to go down the road of getting legal action and an injunction.
Are we still confident we can achieve it?
Mr. Melgard, yes.
I believe so. I think, you know, from my experience elsewhere, and Warwick is no different, we are increasing the number of stock condition surveys we carry out each month. We're sort of moving it on about 1.5% each month we get towards total coverage. I think we can accelerate that with the work we're doing, with the resource we're bringing in to help coordinate visits. I think once we get to sort of 95%, that's when the diminishing returns kick in. I think that's where it does need more. I think at the moment, I'd fully expect us to be getting up to 90-95%, looking at where there are genuine reasons that people don't let us in, because we can do stock condition surveys when a property becomes empty, becomes a void. We can do them in other ways where we are going out and doing essential works. So I think there's more on us to do first. I think once we do get to that 95% level, that would be my aim. We continue going. I think we can accelerate more. That's when I would say cloning, but we'll never assume that a property is free from hazards until we're behind the front door. And I think for the financial planning, getting 95% good data, you know, gives us real, you know, assurance then when we look over 50-year business plan as much as we can about what investment's needed and how we can afford that. But at the moment, I think our focus is very much getting into those properties, getting into those homes, explain to tenants and residents why there's a benefit and what we can do. And the process that the teams are following will see that accelerate. So I think by sort of getting towards the end of the year, I'd fully expect us to be up at 90% plus, and then looking at where there are genuine reasons and picking those up. At the moment, I think our focus should be absolutely on getting that percentage up more.
Councillor Bird.
Just for understanding really, when you go into the properties and inspect to comply with the big six, say the Big Six, how many people do that, or is the surveyor capable of doing it all? One visit?
We'll have, Mr. Dart is more technically accomplished on this than I am, but we'd have when we have a surveyor who is trained, we'll be doing the stock condition. I think they'll pick up any other hazards that are present. They won't be technically proficient to do a gas servicing, or electrical certificate. We'd have specialists to do that. But there's no reason why, if we are arranging for a gas inspection, that a surveyor can't be accompanying that person. So stock condition survey might take half an hour to an hour in a flat, maybe longer in a house, depending on the number of rooms, to go through the Decent Homes form that we have. So there are ways of combining those visits, as we spoke earlier, to try and reduce the impact, the number of visits we need. And I think that's incumbent on the teams working with each other, planning where the gaps are still. So we can go and we can arrange those visits with the sort of lessening the impact. But yeah, we're not throwing everything on one individual to be doing the survey and the tests. We still need specialists to do that, but we are broadening the training that those surveyors are undertaking to carry out the refreshed housing health and safety rating system, because the number of components or checks has reduced, but it is something they're adapting as part of the surveys. So Mr. Dart might want to add to that, but does that sort of answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see how we can get the timescale down so we can hit it, and that's multitasking. I take gas and electricity specialists, but the other ones are specialists in their own thing, but probably more common knowledge of what's going on, sufficient to, with training, be the surveyor. We've got to get it down. We've got to speed it up.
Councillor Dixon.
Just another alternative would be training our gas or electric surveyors to do the stock condition survey the other way. You know, would that be a possibility as well?
Some organisations have done that. They have made those businesses responsible, you know, for collecting that data. It's worked with various success in terms of the quality of that data. If you're asking a gas engineer to make judgments on the condition of the roof and the condition of the windows and the like, then you know they do need you know really good and adequate training to do that. You know that's an approach that was taken you know by some of the you know in the early days of the audit commission inspections and things like that. So it's obviously one you're familiar with. So it isn't something we've explored at this stage. You know, the contracts that we've got in place haven't got that facility, you know, in place at the moment. So we are working to actually gain access to the properties now, alongside carrying out the gas service, carrying out the electrical inspections. So we're doing a lot of work now around linking all of that together. We are still faced with the reality that to be a complete and compliant stock condition survey, you do have to access all the areas of the property, because you have to record all of the components. So you could end up in a position where you do still do that, but if you haven't accessed, the resident hasn't allowed you to access all areas of the property, then you, from a pure compliance perspective, you haven't got a complete stock condition survey, but you have got the best that you could get at that particular point in time. And then you'd have to sort of take a view, from what you've seen in the property otherwise, and then externally what you've actually seen in terms of qualifying that record.
Okay, members, I think unless there's a burning issue, sorry, that's a rather unfortunate turn of phrase there. Unless there's anything major, I'm going to move us on. But before the original intention was just to note the report from Pennington's. But I think also we need to make, I don't know, Mr. Leach, you may advise me what the right term is. I don't think it's a recommendation necessarily, but it's certainly a comment or a note to Cabinet about particularly fire safety administrative side, that we express our concern about the slowness of the progress on it, and that at this moment we're not yet able to give assurance on that particular matter on the administrative side of fire safety. If you've got more or less, yeah, okay. Perhaps you can polish it off better for me, Mr. Leach. I don't know.
Through you, Chair. I think that's right in terms of we can flag that and we can give you some words to write back to the portfolio holder on that. But I think it's also going back to Mr. Melgard as the head of housing as well. Yeah. And I think the point which came up quite early in the debate, which you might want to reflect on, was the question of, okay, what's the timescale? what's the strategy? Did you want to see that in your next update report in terms of, because you'll get another report in a minute in terms of the Consumer Compliance Action Plan. Did you want to see something in that in the next meeting, for example?
I think I have to be the next meeting. Mr. Malgard, you've got actions going at the moment. Is it the next meeting or the September meeting? We're meeting both in August and September. And I think we want a much better progress, a much more in-depth review in September, perhaps. Give you a couple of months and hoping to see substantial progress. If we can build that into the comments. And I think, yes, I agree, it should go to not just Councillor Melrose, but also Mr. Malgard. Members, are you content with that? Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. We now move, if those of you keeping track of where we are on the agenda, now move on to item 10, the Housing Service Area Plan. And Mr. Malgard, I think it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Refreshingly for me, it's a very short report. I'm sure you're pleased to see. Essentially, it was just a request from committee to have the opportunity to, I suppose, ask questions about the service area plan. The report just explains the process that was undertaken to form the plan alongside all the other service area plans for the council. The gap analysis that was presented last meeting set out that this is part of the current reporting, which is the performance report with the adopted service area plans, which is reviewed, I believe, quarterly by Overview and Scrutiny, and this is an update that councillors see every few weeks. So I think the purpose of the service area plan was to provide clarity for officers around the key work priorities, the work streams that are going to be deliverable, or certainly those key work streams between now and where we will see LGR come into play. Alongside that, a set of very high-level performance measures, again conscious that we see and members see a very detailed set of reports coming through to Housing Scrutiny Committee as part of the regular briefing notes and the quarterly performance assurance framework. So they don't reflect the full suite of performance measures that the committee see, but a sort of a top line temperature check really for progress, alongside the housing risk register. And again, I've explained in the report that the significant risk registers are also reviewed by the head of housing with the departmental management team, and were mostly recently reviewed back in May. So very happy to take any questions on what's there. Again, it is a 2-year plan. I understand that there will be eyes on the plan so that we get to the halfway stage, but this does capture for us not everything, because it can't, and many things will be within some of these work streams. And I know particularly some of the major ones around the repairs contract mobilisation will include a lot of things around improving performance, AWAB's law, for example, which is essentially a subset of repairs and emergency repairs and hazards. So I'll stop there and let members ask any questions.
Members, any questions, comments? The service area plan was reviewed by Cabinet in March this year. So this is our opportunity if we have any questions for officers. Other than the fact I think I need to go to spectators, the writing is so small at times. Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thanks for the report. I was just wondering where I was looking for an appendix or something, maybe I'm missing something, where the actual measures and performances are going to be set out, because this is obviously a framework or a strategy or an approach. Therefore, when we will see the actual list of what the measures and performance and targets are. Thank you.
If you're looking at as an example repairs, I think what I was mindful about in setting what performance measures go into the service area plan, could quite conceivably have about 300 in there. And there's a balance between accessibility, the time, and the importance for members to look at these things. The more detailed performance measures, we are, as part of the refresh of the Consumer Standards Improvement Plan, looking at the reporting that we bring up through to committee and members. For example, we have now captured a number of measures relating to AWAB's law within the pro forma that we have, which wasn't a standard before. That's now included. We will be able to provide an update, and I'm sure Mr. Dart will be able to present when we get into mobilisation phase of the new contract and present through. I know that we've talked to our consultants about being able to present to members as well about the new contract and how that will work, an opportunity to go through. These are all measures that will have the levers that we can pull, how we'll be holding the contractor to account on performance, commercial aspects. We wouldn't intend to provide that up to every level because it would be far too detailed, but I think there's an opportunity for members to look at what you'd like to see at that top level. And then through that, through the different reporting of, for example, the core group, contract group, and what we see at officer level on a monthly and weekly basis that we monitored. So there would be opportunity for that to bring through, because there'll be an awful lot that we can report on, but there will be a balance of what we present, what's valuable, what are the most important things we want to see, and what we want to track trends on. Crucially, compare what we've got coming in as a new contract, a new contractor, a new repairs approach to how we've gone previously. So we want to have some comparison between how we were reporting, particularly around things like tenant satisfaction with repairs, that the likes of the tenant satisfaction measures give us, because we're asking the same question month on month, so we'll be able to see very quickly what impact the new service is having.
Other questions, members? I think the question from me here is, this is the 26-27 service area plan. When, Councillor Melrose, you want to make a comment?
This service plan is up to the 31st of March 2028 in reflection of LGR. So all the service plans are 2 years.
Right, yes. My question is, will this be revised from effectively revised once we've got 6 or 8 months into the programme? Will this be revised to take account of lessons learned, what else we need to do, etc.? It is, you made the point for exactly, it is a long-term document, and I want it to come back to the committee before changes are made. Mr. Leach, yes.
I think through you, Chair, it's perhaps more of a corporate one rather than just focusing on housing for a moment, because one of the decisions we have taken is to look at all service area plans post LGR decision as well. So there might actually be a mini review at that stage of all of them coming back to Cabinet, depending on what happens there, because by then we have a clear indication of a clearer indication of the impact of LGR as well. Service area plans was to have them agreed for 2 years. So while that's dated, they're actually 2 separate documents, but it is one plan just for easy administrative side. And the plan is to have a review of all the service area plans this November time with Cabinet. Any significant changes with them bring back to Cabinet.
Okay, well, my request then is, can we please see that in the December meeting for housing? We're doing this post-fact, which makes it, I think it's worth you having had a chance to have a look at it and discuss it here, but I think it also helps that we look at it before it gets signed off. Any other comments, members? I think then the only thing to do here, I believe, is to note it. And with that, we are going to move on to item 7, I believe, which is the Consumer Standards Improvement Plan. Mr. Smith, I believe it is you to lead in this.
Chair, I've delegated it to Jen.
Fair enough, Ms. Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as read, but I will provide an overview. So since the last report, 2 additional actions have been completed, bringing the total to 90 actions completed. There is continual validation of the evidence associated with these actions, and all evidence is still being collated. This will all be referenced accordingly for ease and clarity when WDC is inspected by the regulator of social housing. Overall, the improvement plan is still on track, though the safety and quality standard portion of the project is now showing amber due to the remaining actions associated with the Pennington Choices Action Plan. Because of the change in order, as members have noted, there is a separate report pertaining to the Pennington's Action Plan to look at those specific actions. The project team has also taken a decision that the focus for the coming months will be on two specific standards: the safety and quality standard and the transparency, influence, and accountability standard. This will bring the focus to actions relating specifically to the RSH judgment. We will also be looking at the recommendations from the HQN midpoint review and focusing on the remaining Pennington actions. Taking all this into account, the project team will be refocusing the improvement plan as a whole and expect to report on this plan in September, and it will be used as we go into our mock inspection at the end of 2026. Regarding the compliance of the Big Six, we had 16 properties showing as non-compliant for gas certificates. 7 of these properties had the gas checks and certificates had been completed. However, when using our third-party service for validation, the certificates were found to be non-compliant. These were returned to the contractor to be corrected and validated. 9 properties are non-compliant due to not being able to gain access. We continue to work with our contractor to gain access, and if it becomes a continual issue, it will be escalated to our housing enforcement team. With electrical certification, to curb the properties falling out of compliance, we are sending our plan programs to our contractor 6 months prior. This enables plenty of time to gain access prior to expiration of current certificates, and when needed, properties are passed, or if needed, properties are passed to our housing enforcement colleagues to push through the no access process and assist with accessing those properties. With the fire risk assessments, there are 44 properties showing as non-compliant. This was due to a delay in setting up the contractor to carry out the renewal of the fire risk assessments. This has now been resolved. Priority has been given to the high-risk or high-rise buildings, high-risk buildings, and we are beginning to receive those risk assessments for review by the fire safety lead. The remedial actions are being tracked through a task and finish group, and there is an expectation that with this group, the number will be reduced at pace. That's an update, and we're happy to take any questions.
Members? Councillor Dixon.
Welcome to hearing that the number of fire risk assessments is going down and it's happening at pace. How fast? Where have we got to now?
The task and finish group meet every week, and I have requested last week that I'm provided a list of what we think can be closed and who's going to be closing it. So we almost have that flight path. It's what we've discussed. So we're hoping that we'll be able to show that in August and show exactly how many are coming down. We've brought in, we've brought in extra resources, but they're internal resources. So people who are competent in the software who can go in with the evidence and close some of that backlog of those remedial actions.
Are they competent to understand what they're closing? They're competent in the system, but have they got the knowledge? I'm sure they're competent officers, but have they got the knowledge to know what they're closing?
They have been trained as well with the fire safety lead to understand exactly what they are looking at and what they should be closing down and what is deemed as being evidence of closing those remedial actions. So we've trained them, we've given them the information, and if the information is in the system and they are able to link it all up, they should be able to see it and close it down.
Councillor Bird.
Yes, I notice on table 3, in the big 6, we have completed fire risk assessments. Target equals 100%. So March 26 it was 100%, April it was 26 100%, May it was 83.58%. Why?
Ms Morrison, yes.
So those fire risk assessments within our policy are able to be reviewed by the fire safety lead and the building safety lead, which they were done, which can not prolong them, but gives us 6 months. So we have a risk assessment in place for all those buildings. They have been reviewed. There's been no fundamental change to the buildings. So they've deemed those risk assessments still as being in place while they negotiated the contract. So the gap you're seeing is those properties within that time fell into that contract negotiation to go out and do the risk assessments. So the contractor, consultant, to me, they're interchangeable, so I apologize. But they are out doing them now, with the high-rise buildings being the priority.
So as we seem to have a percentage for each month, it's legitimate to ask, we've had June's figure?
Sorry, June will be different?
No, have you got June's figure?
Have you got June's figure?
I do not have June's figures as yet. I can tell you that the first lot of those high-risk buildings were received last week. So three risk assessments were received last week and were being reviewed by the fire safety lead.
So this heading, completed fire risk assessments, is that just the high-rise or is that all?
No, that will be all of them, which is in the other table. So there's 7 that are high-rise and then 37 within the rest of the blocks.
Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, interesting. So just building on that point, I was interested in how the percentages are set, because I guess it's important that it will allow you to schedule your workload, and therefore, of these, for a percentage, 100% or 99%, you must have so many in mind for that month. But I guess other ones might come along. So does that mean you then look at the number you've got to complete in 12 months and then just split it for each month? Because for planning workload, I guess you'd want a steady sort of program of work. So you'd want a consistent, steady number of assessments to carry out and to complete each month. So I'm kind of interested in how those percentages, behind the percentage, what are the volumes for each month? Do they vary or are they quite steady throughout? Others must come along again as last minute, as well as having a forecast for number of properties to get around as well.
Mr Malgar.
Yeah, it is something we want to get smarter about. I think what we have seen, obviously, with the imperative of getting everything in place and done, there's been a huge amount of fire risk assessments done across all of our stock. As we've said, every dwelling, every building, qualifying building has had a fire risk assessment. The policy that we have, which was put in place a couple of years ago, is currently being reviewed. We're developing an updated fire risk policy with our corporate health and safety team, and I'll be looking for the assets compliance team on the back of that to be putting together a program that's kind of more of a smooth program, so that what we don't see is that everything gets hit in 1 year. We have an administrative snowball of actions to clear. We then have nothing in the second year. So I think there's a bit of that working out in line with the policy, which buildings require reviews at what period, making sure they're programmed in-house, externally, in a program that's manageable, so that we can control and manage the flow of actions. And there'll always be actions coming through from estate inspections, from visits, other things. But from those inspections, I want to see a smoother program that's more manageable, that obviously doesn't compromise and put us at risk, but is in line with the frequency that we've set out in the policy. So I'll be looking for that to come through as part of that exercise, so that we've got a clearer plan that we can then help us with managing resources.
Councillor Dixon, yes.
Sorry to come back. Just looking at the AWAB's law figures, it's a bit concerning that the percentage of orders relating to damp mould and condensation in scope 2 AWAB's law completed within the target time is getting smaller each month. Could you just say a bit more about that, please?
Who's taking that, Mr. Melgard or Mr.
I'd like to defer that to Mr. Dark, please.
Mr. Dark, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we are looking into that. We've had a meeting with the contractor. We've been looking at the detail of the progress on those cases, and we've asked the contractor to come up with an improvement plan in terms of improving that. We have found some cases where they weren't even making appointments with the residents within the actual timescale. I think also we have had some feedback from the contractor that we're probably not giving enough time to complete some of this work, because if you've got replastering work and damp work, so they're asking us to think about should we be giving them a longer period of time to actually complete the work, which would be fine. We would have carried out the mitigation, and if we give them a longer period of time, as long as that's communicated to the residents, we've carried out the work to remove the immediate risk. So as I said, we're reviewing cases at the moment with them. We're having weekly meetings about the list of outstanding works, we're going to be enhancing our reporting to make sure that we are actually that we are actually starting the works within the required period as well. We are looking to improve that.
Mr. Melgard, yeah.
Just before I have to leave committee, I would add that we have a new repairs manager, interim repairs manager, starting this week. One of the safety action groups as part of Office of Governance will be AWAB's law. Do want to have a regular oversight of exactly this detail, working across teams, working with the contractors to get under the skin of what it's telling us, to make sure that we can crucially be looking to improve performance, but also looking ahead to the next phase of AWAB's law, which will come in later in the year. Key part of that will be the work on the mobilisation with the new contractor, to make sure that we've got sufficient capacity, contract resources and governance and reporting to make sure that we're not storing up any issues. So this will be key as part of our work with that mobilisation work stream, to make sure we're looking ahead and not just looking where we are now. And I think with the changes that will come through, we need to be absolutely preparing for that now. And I know Mr. Dark and the team with training, what we're doing about more sort of awareness training for like the housing officers, bringing that through. It will be a significant step up in those hazards which are captured. So we may need to look also at sort of the resourcing that we have to make sure that we're able to sort of improve all of our metrics on these measures. So it will continue to be this level of detail we're reporting. We've got it in place, we've got the systems, we've got the processes now. It's using this information and acting on it.
Councillor Dixon.
Can I just ask, is this coming back to us each meeting?
Yes, I believe it does. Yes. Sorry, was the point following up on that? Just no, we will see this next month. I think it's somehow August the 17th or 19th. Oh, on average, 18th, I'm told. Other comments? Mr. Leach has given me a question here that I think is a very valid question, but what I propose to do with the question is, rather than try and absorb it while I'm chairing the meeting, I'm going to ask officers to answer the question, circulate the answer to the question to the Housing Scrutiny Committee. Otherwise, I think we might be here 10 minutes trying to understand make sure I get the question correctly described. Members, are there any other questions? This is just a report to note. Are we happy to note it? Thank you very much, members. Then that was item 7. We now move on to, I think it is item 11, which is the tenants' satisfaction measures. Now, Mr. Smith, I'm going to be told you're taking this one this time.
Can't get out of this one,
yes.
thank you, Chair. This report presents the Council's 25-26 tenant satisfaction measures, which have been submitted to the regulator of social housing in line with our statutory requirements. If you recall the last meeting, Chair, we provided a report which talked about how the perception elements of those satisfaction measures were administered and organised. So this now is the outcome of both the perception measures and also the management information that we have to provide as well to the social housing regulator. So overall, I think the results provide a positive picture, whilst also highlighting areas where further improvement is required. Firstly, if I could just highlight the tenant perception elements, this has improved across every one of the 12 satisfaction measures compared with last year, or the previous year, should I say, sorry. Overall satisfaction has increased from 58% to 72% of the housing service. It's safe to say this indicates that tenants are recognising the work that's been undertaken to improve customer engagement and service delivery. Secondly, to focus on the management information measures, these present a more mixed picture. Building safety compliance, which I think we've touched on 2 or 3 times throughout this meeting, remains extremely strong, with almost all measures at or close to 100%. We've also seen improvements in the number of complaints being received and improved response times. However, there are 1 or 2 areas where operational performance has reduced. Most notably was the emergency repairs, and again, some of which we've been talking about, and gas safety as well. We've tried to benchmark the outcomes of the measures with all other landlords who have provided details to Housemark. And we remain below the sector median in a number of measures, but we are sort of improving and going through to the upper quartiles. The report therefore reflects, I think, the service that's moving in the right direction, but which recognises where further improvements are needed. And those activities are underway through the new repairs contract, improvements to complaints handling, and some of the other measures which we've spoken of throughout this meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Members, questions? If you don't, I'll kick off with one. I think it's very encouraging that we have a all-green report. Then I look at the next page to see that actually, while we're doing much better than we were, we're still basically 4th quartile. So I think my comment would be, and I'm sure Mr Smith, this is something you're obviously aware of, that we've still got work to do on the tenant satisfaction measures, given that we are only fourth quartile.
Yes, Chair, and the benchmarking, I think, demonstrates improvement, but also highlights the challenge ahead. What I would point out is many other landlords have improved as well, so I think it's a moving target that we have. But you rightly say, and we are obviously putting in measures through the improvement plan, particularly now that it's going to be refocused on some of those key areas. We will see that improvement coming through compared to other landlords. What I would say is we can do more in-depth, and we are proposing, when the full results come out from all landlords, we are proposing to do some more benchmarking, maybe around more similar, authorities and housing providers, rather than taking in the whole sort of sector itself, and that may be more meaningful in terms of sort of gauging the progress that we're making compared to other local authorities or smaller housing associations. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Members, any other comments? Okay, again, I think we have to note this. Thank you to the officers for, obviously we're heading in the right direction. As I say, we need to run a little bit faster than everybody else, but it's encouraging. We'll maybe want to look at when we next see this. I don't know when it's next scheduled to see this.
Chair, this is the annual report or the annual measures that we have to provide to the housing regulator. Yeah.
Yep.
However, within the performance information, we do monitor this through the quarters, so we can, with the performance assurance framework, we can focus on these measures as well.
Thank you. Again, members, you're content to note? Yeah. Thank you. We now move on to item 8, section 106 acquisition report. Mr Elton, Ms Hodd, thank you very much for your patience. Not quite 2 hours into the meeting, but who is leading on this?
Hi. Sorry, Chair, thank you for that. So members of Housing Scrutiny will be aware this is the second report to come back to scrutiny on section 106 acquisitions. The report was requested to come back to provide the detail of the proposed acquisition framework, which was referred to in the last report, and that's now been attached as Appendix 1. This report also provides further detail on the potential implications for the Council of the December motion, particularly around the Council's aspirations for its housing development programme. Sorry, it's noisy. So on the 3rd of December 2025 at the Council meeting, Councillor Mateki proposed a motion regarding the responsible acquisitions of Section 106 homes. The intention was to ensure that future Section 106 acquisitions were financially and environmentally robust, following transparent and measurable governance processes. The motion gave particular consideration to service charges on future Section 106 acquisitions and the attainment of our enhanced environmental requirements. The full motion is shown in Figure 1 in the report. It was to ensure responsible acquisitions of Section 106 homes by the Council. So the Council requests a report to Cabinet from officers exploring the potential to only acquire Section 106 affordable housing units in developments where it is confirmed by the developer that they intend to have the roads and green spaces adopted by the relevant public authority, i.e. Warwickshire County Council as a local highways authority and or WDC as a district council, and that there is no requirement for private management companies, therefore protecting the council and residents from unrestricted and escalating service charges. Secondly, for all acquired Section 106 homes to meet the standards set out in the Council's Climate Emergency SPD, including but not limited to net zero operational carbon targets, high energy efficiency standards, sustainable drainage systems, SUDS, and provision for active travel and reduced car dependency. And thirdly, for officers to develop and implement a due diligence checklist for all potential acquisitions to ensure compliance with the above criteria, and to include a performance measure within the relevant service area plan that would report annually to overview and scrutiny on the outcomes of the policy, including the number of homes acquired and their compliance status. In response to the motion, Council resolved to request a report from officers to the Housing Scrutiny Commission, then Cabinet, exploring the motions and the potential impacts. The second report provides further response with more detail. You will read that the recommendations of the report are that the committee notes the contents of the motion and the potential impacts this may have on the Council's housing development programme as outlined in this report. 2, that the committee recommends to Cabinet that the following elements of the motion are not agreed: that homes are only acquired if there is a commitment from the developer to have all roads and open space adopted, and that homes are only acquired if there are no private management arrangements in place. 3, that the committee recommends to Cabinet that the following elements of the motion should be assessed as part of an acquisition framework when acquiring Section 106 properties: net zero operational carbon targets, high energy efficiency standards, sustainable urban drainage systems, provision for active travel and reduced car dependency. 4, that the committee recommends to Cabinet that the following elements of the motion are agreed for officers to develop as part of an acquisition framework: the development of a due diligence checklist and the inclusion of a performance measures with regular reporting. And 5, that the committee considers the Section 106 acquisition framework outlined in Appendix 1 and recommends to Cabinet that this is adopted by the Council. And that the committee recommend to the Cabinet that a criteria is developed regarding the adoption of public open spaces and any associated infrastructure in line with the provisions of the Public Open Space Supplementary Planning Document, and that the Constitution is revised as appropriate in line with the new adoption criteria to show any changes in delegation. These recommendations will allow the Council to prioritise the acquisition of high-quality, well-designed, affordable homes that best meet identified housing need, represent strong value for money, and support the delivery of its strategic priorities, including net zero, allowing for a case-by-case decision that will be based on the balanced assessment of all criteria, recognising that not all schemes will meet every requirement and that flexibility may be applied where justified by strong financial or delivery of place-making benefits. Overall, the recommendations of the framework aim to increase the acquisition of high-quality, low-carbon, affordable social housing across the district by assessing acquisitions on a case-by-case basis rather than applying a fixed standard that could significantly reduce the number of homes available for acquisition by the Council. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to do this slightly differently, and then I'm going to ask Councillor Whiteman to, as one of the, I think you're the second of Councillor Whiteman, any comments or concerns you may have, and then throw this over to Councillor Melrose. At that point, ask members for other questions.
Thank you, Chair. As the person who seconded the original motion, I have to say this is probably one of the most disappointing papers I've read since becoming a councillor, really. It seems to me to suggest that the motion that was unanimously agreed by council, that we applied some standards to what we are purchasing from the housing revenue account on behalf of our tenants, is not adhered to, particularly in regards to the service charges, because it would be catastrophic. Now, I do understand the need to balance housing need and the need to meet it, but I think the paper is a little bit thin, really, in terms of why it seems to be suggesting that the Section 106 acquisition of freehold properties subject to leasehold charges, for example, would have such a catastrophic effect that we really shouldn't adhere to it, and we should leave officers 100% unfettered discretion to decide that they can go ahead and purchase. And there are a couple of questions that I would like, just to sort of see whether we could get some more information on. How many Section 106 acquisitions are we currently holding where the council is paying a leasehold charge on it? Because I understand some of the social housing, we can't pass this on to our tenants. I understand in any event that we are dealing with some of the most vulnerable people, who we are housing. So to some extent, unless we're able, for affordable housing, I know some of them may be able to get it back from housing benefit, but my understanding is not everybody would be able to recover it if it was passed on. But for social housing, I understand we can't pass it on. So if we were to acquire a freehold property for use of future tenants, we are saying that that would be swallowed by the housing revenue account. And that, for me, isn't a good use of council, what is a limited, finite account to meet an ever-increasing housing demand. So I'm just really interested to know, how many properties have we currently got where we are paying this money because it's an uncapped charge? I mean, there's all sorts of references within the paper to, we're going to have a look and see what it's reasonable, we're going to understand what the charging structure is. But all of those reassurances and safeguards can only be applicable, and as the law currently stands, at the point of purchase. There's no legal obligation or sort of powers that would sit with the council after acquisition of the properties to prevent unreasonable service charges escalating as matters go on. It's suggested that this would be catastrophic, but I really would like to understand a little bit more about what proportion of our current housing stock is subject to this. I would like to know quite why, for example, we are not pursuing other avenues of acquiring property. Why are we not developing any of our own? We've sold off a number of land sites. How many new sites have we acquired recently to develop new social housing on? How many new joint ventures have we embarked upon? It's part of our corporate strategy that we're looking to develop Milverton Homes, our wholly owned house building company, to look at joint ventures and to sort of increase our stock of housing. But is it really our main plank of meeting future housing demand that we are relying on Section 106 purchases of freehold properties that are subject to these unfair leasehold charges, which the current Labour government has acknowledged is a scandal that needs to be addressed, has said that it is going to address the injustice of it, and yet we have here a Labour portfolio holder endorsing an approach where it seems we are going to actively encourage leasehold in our local district. And the other thing I perhaps did want to ask, I noticed the section of the paper that referred to one of the negative implications if we were to adopt these restrictions on purchasing leasehold properties was that it might interfere with our acquisition of Crew Lane properties. Now, as a joint venture, I was absolutely startled at that. Are we seriously saying that a joint venture that one of the wholly owned Warwick District Council house building companies is involved in is not putting those public open spaces up for adoption by Warwick District Council? Are we really saying that we are expecting the residents on those sites to pay this leasehold charge in addition to their full council tax? Are we really saying that it's fair for them to endure an uncapped charge that over time may well affect mortgage companies' willingness to actually lend on such properties? They may be buying a property that is over time becoming a ticking time bomb, frankly, because it may become unsellable almost, or it's certainly going to have a reduced value, because this is a, basically going to become a two-tier system over time, where these properties that are, particularly if any action is taken by the government in accordance with its manifesto promises to try and stamp this sort of unfair practice out, if we are then left with anybody who's subject to a charge, they're not going to be particularly popular. You know, mortgage companies are going to sort of really treat with caution. It's the same way they did the doubling ground rents that the house building companies introduced a few years ago. The mortgage companies became extremely reluctant to pay on it. The government ultimately had to address that. But this is deeply worrying to me. It doesn't feel like we as a council are really buying into what was a unanimously agreed motion that we should adopt some standards, and it strikes me that we should not be purchasing, with our limited resources, properties that are putting this unfair charge on top of council tax on our tenants, and basically are getting an unlimited financial liability that we can't control moving forwards. So I've seen the acquisition framework document that goes through it, and to me the safeguards in there, you know, what does it say? The cost offer value for money and describe the annual uplift arrangements. Well, is that really a protection for somebody who's subject to these charges? Is it a protection for the council? Because where the management company is already in place, the cost are never going to offer value for money for the tenants, because ultimately this is an excess charge on top of the council tax that they're already required to pay for the maintenance of public spaces. It's an excess charge. It's completely unfair. And the idea as well that we can describe the annual uplift arrangements. We can't control the annual uplift arrangements. We just describes them. Well, great. You know, we know we're being ripped off at the outset, but it's not actually a proper safeguard. So I have all sorts of concerns about this. I would be grateful if we could get some additional information just to understand the scale of the impact that's being described as quite huge on local demand, because I think there are other ways, and I think it is a deliberate policy that as a council we should be adopting to try to influence and use our purchasing power to encourage the putting up of open spaces for adoption and to try and get rid of this unjust practice. But you know, this for me as a paper just doesn't address the issues that led to the motion, and it doesn't address the concerns that we raised in the original discussion when it came to this committee first time round. That you know, I think there was a long discussion about potentially allowing some discretion and not completely outruling it, so in exceptional circumstances, but there was a strong feeling amongst the in the last discussion that it should be by exception. I would say the recommendations here do kind of lean towards having no policy at all and leaving an unfettered discretion on the acquisitions, which I don't think is what we want. I think it was actually, you know, completely against the motion that went to council and was agreed unanimously.
Thank you, Councillor Whiteman. Councillor Melrose, you want to
Yes.
then Ms Hobbs.
Thank you, Chair. First point of clarification and correction is this is always a council decision about reacquisition section 106 houses. It's nothing to do with the officers. What this is discretion is putting opportunities forward to us, and these are the questions they will be asking. The process, as it's currently is in the process, any acquisition opportunity goes to the Housing Strategy Board, which is chaired by myself, with the portfolio of finance and the portfolio of decarbonisation. We have an agreement of looking at using this framework, which the question will be, what is the interest per year? What is the arrangements? Can we sit on the board? These are the questions we need to answer before we'd even put a paper towards Cabinet and then forward towards Council, because these would be the questions that you all would be asking. This framework is sort of more of a checklist to make sure that we are complying with all our ambitious standards. Does this mean we're going to take every house? No, there's going to be some where they bring the CPI and say, oh, it's uncapped. Of course we're all going to say no to that. But if it's one that goes, actually it's capped at this and 1%, we might look at in the round. Because we've got people in temporary accommodation that's costing us £140 a week. I've got people in bed and breakfast that's cost about £100 a week. I'm going to look at that and look at the cost of putting them in a 1-bed or 2-bed with maybe a service charge. I have to look at all in the round. If we try to take a house with every single one of our ambitions, we probably are going to have to wait a long time, because it goes through the planning system. We've seen that in Net Zero DPD, an ambition of ours, a right decision ambition of ours, but that takes time to get through the system. This will also take time to go through the system, but we've got a growing waiting list, so we have to take everything to the balance, and I think this framework tries to incorporate everything everyone has been asking when it comes to adoption of quality houses. You're talking infrastructure, you're talking service charges, you're talking management fees, you're talking every way. Do we like management fees? No. But this is an imperfect world and we're trying to make the best decisions for our residents. When it comes to Milverton Homes, I want to obviously explore more of how these arrangements happened, but these arrangements happened in a time before us and when the joint venture was agreed. So I'm more than happy with Councillor Whiteman to us to look at how we got to a situation when we have a management company where we are the fully owned shareholder with a joint venture. As you're fully aware of why we've not been developing, we've stretched ourselves. Obviously, we are developing in some places, but we have to accept we can't go through one avenue to acquire houses. We have to spread ourselves in different ways. We've got people's right to buy. If we don't take any Section 106 houses because we do this blanket ban, then we have to accept there's some houses right now for the next short term we're not getting. And what will happen, it's not going to registered providers. They'll just be discounted houses and they'll go into being sold because that's what's happening now. I've got developers, and I'm not going to go into specifics because we're not in confidential session, are coming to us for viability. And I bet you if we go on a blanket ban, they'll all claim viability, they can't give me any rented properties, and before you know it, it'll reduce the amount of any of our affordable properties because they're already doing it. And I know we don't want that to happen, but I'm trying to make sure that we do things in a balance. But I would dispute that what these officers have done is set out the risks of each option. That is all we can ask of them. They're staying neutral. This is a neutral report, and I've asked them to do risk of each option of how we do this. I didn't want not just do nothing because that would ruin the unanimous motion. But I understand we might not be able to do it blanket ban. I think having this framework sets out a very clear process of how we decide on which Section 106 we require and which ones we don't.
Mr. Leach, you have a process point, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a point that Councillor Whiteman was making about this report going in the face of the recommendation from Council. I think I need to be clear for all councillors that was a motion which was passed, which sought to report back to Cabinet as the decision maker on any policy on this, and that is the report which is coming back. Officers have a duty to provide their professional judgment to you as councillors for you to consider, and that is what is presented in front of you for you to look at. You could consider and go against that and provide alternative recommendations to the Cabinet if you so wish, and that would be a point the Cabinet could then consider at that point when they come to taking their decision. But officers do have that duty there to provide you their professional guidance or recommendation, which in my view is what you have before you this evening. I just thought it would be helpful, Chair.
Thank you. Ms Hobbs, you wanted to perhaps address some of Councillor Whiteman's concerns.
Yes, thank you. I do fully understand your concerns, and we completely understand. We work with people who are very vulnerable, on very low incomes. Our households struggle to meet bills. I mean, it's really tricky. But fundamentally, we have to balance delivering more social homes against the balance of those constraints are already in place. So that's already in place. So the fact that they don't have to give us, they don't have to let us adopt those facilities. They can set up a management company. That happens before they even come to us. That's a planning arrangement. And you've got to understand the practicalities that we're then faced. So I, as well as housing development, or not housing development, as well as housing strategy, I also manage housing needs. And people are in desperate measures. I've got so many people in temporary accommodation. We simply haven't got enough supply. And I suppose I'm trying to find a pragmatic response that allows members to have a look at the acquisitions that come through and make a decision. I'm not saying, yes, you have to take them. It's not an officer decision. It's absolutely not an officer decision. It goes to Cabinet. But what I'm saying is, please look at them. Please consider them. in the round and then make a decision about whether or not you think you would want them. I think the point about us as a developer, we're quite a small authority. We've got a lot of money tied up into our big joint venture at the moment, which is delivering a lot of homes. They have got a management arrangement in place. That was probably practical, given that it's a joint venture arrangement. I don't think we're in a position to be developing large scale. So the way we acquire new homes is through Section 106s. And it is a very practical way that we can get more council housing for people on our waiting list. If sometimes we're purchasing because nobody else has purchased them, I know that's happened in the past, and you might think, well, actually, don't purchase them, but then the outcome is they will probably be converted to a commuted sum, and that's much worse. We've lost affordable homes. We've lost that public value, and then we might get some money back, but what we can develop is never to the same value. So I suppose what I've done is presented what I thought was a pragmatic approach.
Mr. Elkington, you wanted to add some.
I suppose my point is just to elaborate a little bit on the service charges and the nature of them. So service charges are typically for the maintenance of open spaces or associated infrastructure and the highways infrastructure that is on a particular estate. Now, we as a local authority can do nothing at all to force a developer to put forward open space or highways for adoption. We have a policy for open space which says that we expect these open spaces to be put forward for us to adopt them, but that is different to a requirement, and there is no legal mechanism in existence in this country yet without primary legislation being created that would allow us to force a developer to put forward highways and to put forward open space for us to adopt. At the moment, when developers do put forward open space for adoption, which is the only element of the charges that we potentially have control of, those spaces, that offer has to be evaluated by our Green Spaces team, who will look at what is being proposed. They will look at the space, they will look at the quality of the infrastructure and the proposals that are being put forward, and then they will make a decision on whether or not that is within the best interests of Warwick District Council as a whole, and all of the council taxpayers within the district. If they subsequently opt to nominate not to take that open space on, we leave the developers, and this is not defending the developers because, as has been said before, there's no one wants these service charges to exist. But when we make that decision not to adopt, if the land is put forward, we leave them with no choice but to put a management company in place, because those open spaces, that infrastructure, has to be maintained in some way. So we ask for sustainable urban drainage systems to be installed as part of our planning requirements. So that is decided way before the foundation even goes in the ground. That has to be maintained. If there are any other conditions around things like noise attenuation barriers, that has to be maintained as well. It can't just be left. And if we don't take them on, that cost, that requirement has to be met from somewhere. We can't adopt a blanket policy of taking on every piece of open space and every piece of infrastructure, because again, that would create an equally risky situation where we could end up with developers putting forward shoddy proposals knowing that we'll just take them on. There is a framework associated with this that sets out the kinds of cost and the kinds of allocations of sums that we should be given if we do adopt a space. But again, that is only an expectation. There is no requirement for the developer to actually put that forward. So we do have a role in the decision-making process, which is why there's one of the recommendations is around establishing that criteria for deciding on adoption of open space when they're put forward. As Nicola has already said, there's a massive demand for houses within the district. Section 106 obligations, they are by far our biggest contributor to the housing pipeline. As said in the report, there were over 300 houses that came through via that route in 2025, 24-25. So it does contribute massively to what we do. I can find the exact numbers for what it would mean to our housing pipeline if we were to take a decision not to buy any more Section 106 houses with management charges in place. But that will be the vast majority of houses that are coming forward over the next 2 years, because they're all on developments that already have planning permission in place, that have already had the decisions around the adoption of the open space taken, and we can't unpick them afterwards. There is no mechanism for us to then suddenly change our mind. What we are seeing, and in most of our developments now, the trend on the service charges is to set up management companies that, rather than being sort of ran in the back rooms of development companies and farmed out to independent organisations who just set charges in the dark without transparency, we're seeing a shift now towards resident-led management companies. So certainly on our joint venture site up at Crew Lane, that is a tenant-led management organisation where, when the site is completed, the management, every person who buys a home on that site, including the council, becomes a part of that management organisation. And then at the end of the development, a number of directors on the board of the management company are residents on the site now. And they have visibility of the service charges that are coming forward. They have visibility of the proposals, and they have the mechanism of booting the management agent out if they don't want to take that forward, if the expenses grow too much. And that is the same as what we're seeing with developers like Taylor Wimpey. They're putting forward similar proposals on most of their sites. So whilst it doesn't give us perfect control over what happens with the charges in the future, it does put the control much more closely into the hands of the people who actually live on those estates, rather than being solely in the hands of the developer. So this is, as Nicola said, this is an attempt to put forward a pragmatic way to address these concerns, of not saying that we'll adopt a blanket policy either way, but we'll adopt something that sits somewhere in the middle, where we evaluate each of these developments on a case-by-case basis without putting down a barrier that would effectively stop the vast majority of our acquisitions.
Okay, thank you. I probably at this point should just declare that I live in a small residential estate where we have our own management company, which generally runs very well because we don't have any sewage facilities. We have a biodisc and clean grass, but I think this is it's only a small development, but I'm encouraged to hear that we're getting more residential management, because I think the real concern, if I've understood you right, Councillor Whiteman, is over the provision of housing with uncapped management charges, rather than the concept of a management company, residentially run management company. You're concerned about the uncapped charges.
I think a particular concern is with the uncapped charges, because I think, that does have potential repercussions on the freehold purchaser, and certainly shared ownership. But, that's a particular... I think there is an inherent underlying injustice anyway with the model, particularly where it relates to freehold, where, you are charging 100% of council tax, and if it's not a sort of fenced area that's genuinely private, I think there is a concern with the leasehold model that basically that is an additional charge on top of people who are living there, paying 100% of council tax, but then being asked to pay for a different open space just by the fact that they purchased in there. So I do think the model itself is unjust. I think there is an underlying thing. Just to be quite clear on, the request that was made and the objection, it was certainly not to Section 106 acquisitions generally. It's to Section 106 acquisitions of properties that are subject to leasehold arrangements, so the purchase of freehold properties where there is a estate charge on it, which is usually uncapped. I mean, it can often be uncapped. It's unregulated at the moment, although we're hoping that, there may be some national government movement on that. But it does leave the people in a difficult position in that, they are potentially not looking to become property managers themselves. Some people might like to have that sort of level of involvement, but typically people aren't looking to become sort of local property managers. They don't want to sort of litigate, even if they get more regulatory rights. Taking the matter to the Landhold Valuation Tribunal is quite expensive, quite risky, and not generally something wants to do if the grass isn't being cut properly. It's something that I feel that the local authority, because it's limited in the controls it can bring through planning controls. Obviously, any restrictions are limited, to the national planning framework. There are only so much you can do through planning, but I do feel, as a purchaser, there is additional authority and an additional ability to potentially bring some influence on the local market in terms of those maintenance arrangements. I do take your point, you can't force certainly not the county council, and I think roads maintenance is if you haven't put the development plans in place to ensure that they're constructed to adoptable standards, that does create a huge issue, because obviously there can be quite considerable rectification costs. But certainly the open spaces where Warwick District Council is potentially the adopting body, the model itself is often not justifying the complications that would be in adoption. And historically, in new estates, those open spaces that are genuinely open spaces were adopted without issue, and the maintenance was carried on through the council tax. Personally, I believe that's really what we should be doing. But as a purchaser of social housing from new estates, I feel we should be putting standards in place and sending out a message to the house builders. That's just my view.
Before I come to you, Councillor Melrose, Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, it is a big area. It's significant. Obviously, going to get a lot of discussion, a lot of questions, because this rolls out not just the 106. I get so many complaints about management companies who've just lost interest, and yet they're getting the revenue. And therefore, I was trying to understand this incentive. Is there an incentive on developers to push it out for adoption? Do they see it as a profitable business in the future? Why do they not offer it up for adoption, whether it's open space or for highways? Because I've got around parts of my ward, and I can't believe that certain sections of highways haven't been adopted. It gets so complicated from the law. Which authority has responsibility over which area? And therefore I was kind of interested in, what is the model? What is the market? Or is every developer different as to they would like to take this on themselves, or they're not prepared to pass it on for the cost to the council to adopt? We'll try and do it ourselves. However, we'll do it on the least cost method. So I'm kind of interested in is it changing? And thank goodness this government consultation, I hope, really puts some certainty on this, because it does, as Councillor Whiteman there said, there's unnecessary cost when they're already paying council tax. So it is quite an issue, but I'd be interested in how, are things changing? Is it becoming more of a problem, or has it always been there? And is there anything we can do to ensure that, residents aren't paying twice, and also they see their roads and their streets and their footpaths not being looked after. The surfaces, I've got one road in mind, the top surface is degrading. Guess what? The management company are going to let it go for another few more years until there's really, potholes and dangerous situations. So anyway, sorry I've rambled on there a lot, but I'm really interested in your insight into, is every developer different? What is the general thinking on this?
I think one of the interesting things from your point there, because which council does which, is actually the LGR may actually resolve that to a certain extent, but that's 2 years away, possibly longer, or just under 2 years away. Right, okay, thank you. Ms Hobbs.
Thank you. So just say firstly, and I think it was coming back to a point made earlier, the preferred standard, the policy of the council is that we will adopt where we can, and they were offered to adoption for us in the first instance. However, there's then a cost to the developer, because they'll have to pay a Section 106 for us to maintain those facilities perhaps for the next 50 years. So it is quicker and easier, no doubt, for a developer to set up a management company, I think. And lots and lots of local authorities don't have that stance. So Warwick has that stance, and a lot of our neighbouring authorities don't. They don't adopt, and they don't offer an adoption model, because then there's also the thing to think about what happens in 50 years. I mean, we won't be here, but somebody will be here wrestling with that question, and I'm not sure we know the answer. Nationally, it's been picked up as an issue. We've all talked about that by government. None of us support these companies that are sort of an abuse of taking money, escalating charges, and not providing services. I think the government model is likely to come down towards a resident tenant-led management company, is my assumption, but obviously that's going to come out, because I don't think they're going to force authorities back to adoption, because there's just not the money. And different developers have different approaches. So we've got one at the moment where we're looking to buy the property, and we were offered the adoption, but we've said no, because that can also happen. So that's another thing, that sometimes the arrangements might be so complicated and whatever the SIDS are or whatever, that the authority thinks we can't manage that. Actually, we don't have the expertise, the technical ability to do that, so we're not going to take it on. They need to arrange that. So, and yet I still am desperate for those houses. I could fill them tomorrow probably 50 times over by families that you must all hear from day in, day out, trying to get housing. So I suppose that's why I'm trying to say we need to take a bit of a balanced decision. And I'm not saying that's easy for any of you, because you must equally all hear from your tenants saying, or residents saying, what about this damn road and I'm being charged £500 a year? It's really hard, which is why I've tried to put in a framework. And what that would do was, as officers, we would say, this is what we view, this is our recommendations. It goes to the strategy board who have a first look at it. And then if it looks within, it could be reasonable, it would then go to cabinet and then it goes to full council. So it's not an officer decision. But I'm just trying to say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, really. Although I equally understand the concerns that are being raised.
Councillor Melrose.
Yeah, I just want to get back on the cap. And I think that's the bit, it's about how much can they increase, because there are some, and don't get me wrong, when you see the increase, you go, they're paying as much as, they're paying more in the management fee than they are paying council tax. So I think that's why in the framework we've sort of said we really want to know what your annual uplift arrangement's going to be, and what it is in terms of the, what's the arrangement? Will tenants get a say on the board? What's the annual uplift? What is the service charges? Because sometimes if you break down them service charges, there's some very interesting things on there that tenants are meant to get, but they never do. And I have seen places around the district where the tenants have campaigned to reduce their service charges because they say you've not provided these services. But having that open and clear from the offset, I think makes us councillors able to have that more rounded, balanced decision of these are these houses, these are the arrangement, this is the uplift. So for, let's just say, I'm trying to not use one because we're not in confidential session, but let's say one is £5 a week, uplift is CPI plus 1%, then you'll look at it over 20 years and go, well, what's the cost of temporary accommodation right now? What's the cost of putting them in bed and breakfast? What's the cost of this? And you can make that more well-rounded decision. If a company came to us and said it's uncapped, I wouldn't bring it forward to council or cabinet, and I think it would be easily chucked out, and I think that would be easily signals to them saying, so we are sending a signal to the developers going, if you come to us with uncapped, we're going to turn around and say no. That message will land because they all talk to each other. So I think this will be the start of setting that message, and we head towards what the ambitious goal of what Councillor Techie and Councillor Whiteman were trying to do with that motion.
Okay, Councillor Bowden, I think we then need to move to a conclusion.
Yes, I think the issue is we don't trust developers. They want their 18%, whatever happens, and they'll move hell and high water to get it, which includes charging the people who bought their houses a fee. Bearing in mind, they're also paying council tax. So it's council tax plus the fee, which clearly isn't fair. And there needs to be some mechanism that we can actually put of how we can get a cap in there, because I quite agree with capitalist ones, forget it. Everything says Section 106 does this, that does it in advance at the planning stage. That's the first I've heard it happens at the planning stage as chair of the planning committee. Perhaps I ought to know that, but I didn't. I don't suppose anyone else does. We really need to be looking, and it is a case of sending messages to developers. Because they come up now, the market is as it is, they're not selling houses, they've stopped building. So that gives us our lack of 5-year land supply, so we get hit for that. And I don't care what people say on the new local plan, we'll be hit with that in the first year. What I think we need to do is to be saying that we will only go capped, and how can we build that into the Section 106 agreement? Because that's where it needs to go. And the developers need to understand you're going to pay that, or you pay a bigger fee to give the council a start, if you like, because council are getting its council tax anyway. To do that work, they're getting more of it because there's more houses. And I think we need to get away completely from buying off developers we're just trying effectively to dump houses. There's all kinds of reasons why we want the houses, but we don't want to encourage we're your cheap dump and we will always give you the money. Because that'll be the game that they'll play. You can tell I don't particularly like developers, but that's the game they play. And on the local plan, it was exactly the same. They wouldn't drop below 18% profit. Everyone else is suffering, supermarkets and all that down to 2 or 3%, but a developer wants their 18%, and they won't budge. And they need to be knocked back. The only way we can do that is to refuse some of the developments. And we have refused some, where the housing has been substandard, been too small. Even the houses where the toilets don't line up. So, we need to be able to do things clearly that the developers understand that's what we're going to do. We're not going to be dumped on with your houses, even though we have a need, because they're not what we really want. And I think that's important. But it's really how in the Section 106 process can we get that cap in there so it's known that don't bother if you're going to go for 20%.
Councillor Dixon, apparently I've missed you, so apologies. So Councillor Dixon.
It was a question really. How do we, on sites where there is maybe significant amounts of our own housing, interact with the residents, what would be a residents management committee? Do we have seats on the board? Do they, or is it our residents, or is there a possibility to do that? I'm aware of local sites where we are not the registered housing provider, but there is a significant housing site. There is a residents management committee, and actually the state of the registered site is not good. It's not well kept, and maybe the owners aren't providing the maintenance that they should do for that, and how that the interaction is between the housing provider and the management company.
Which one are you taking it, Mr. Alphings?
That one. So yeah, on the sites that we're responsible for them, where we've bought Section 106 houses, the arrangements can vary depending on the number and the quantity of units that we've got. For some of the larger sites, we will have representatives from our housing development team that are a part of those boards. But equally, any of the residents that are on the sites, regardless of whether they're our tenants or whether they're private tenants, they can be a part of it. The process that's outlined in the report around when we do acquire new units, we look at the legal obligations and the arrangements for the management setup. Again, that's a really important part of the due diligence that the housing team do to make sure that we're not entering into an arrangement where there is uncapped charges that can escalate without any control or influence over them. So that happens up front with the acquisitions. I think where there are sites where we're not the management organisation for them, we're not a part of the management organisation, or another registered provider holds most of the houses that are on the site. The residents that live there, I suppose I'd encourage them to check the terms of their purchase agreement, because there would have been something in there that described how the management arrangements work. And again, to go back to a point that was made earlier, because there's such a growing level of public awareness now about these charges, companies are being a lot more transparent about what charges happen up front. If you go into the website of Linden or Bovis to look at the development of Crew Lane, there's a PDF on there that will tell you what the service charges are for and what they entail and what they're estimated to be, and how the management organisation is set up. Same with the Taylor Wimpey development up at Tournament Field. So there is more transparency. But again, the devil's in the detail, and there probably will be something in those terms and conditions that were signed off at the point where the house was purchased by the individual, that will give them some kind of recourse on what to do if the management company doesn't perform.
Final comment, Ms. Hobbs.
It was just a reflection, really, that one of the things that came out of the government consultation, and the council may want to think about, was the support that could be offered to people who are in these arrangements and want to try and move themselves to a community-led management committee, or already in one and it's not working. So I don't think that's a role that the authority has, and it's something that we might want to think about going forward, whether or not that would help some of our residents and our constituents being able to manage these, because I think particularly the ones that are already in place, I doubt very much that they'll go, and that will be a government-led directive. So that might be something, that might be another solution that the council might want to think about going forwards.
Okay, thank you. I'm very conflicted on this in the sense of I understand exactly where Councillor Whiteman is coming from about uncapped charges. I don't like them any more than anybody else. I also think this is a report where the officers have tried to balance the two factors. But I think we are required as a committee to vote on the recommendations. But what I would suggest, and Mr. Leach, again, I may need your help here, is that we append a note, I think that's the right term, to Cabinet, that we have significant concerns over the possibility of buying uncapped houses for Warwick District Council. Now, we probably need some smarter words than that, but I think we need to, as a committee, if you agree, obviously, to express that we are really not in favour of buying uncapped houses, and to send that message clearly. And I think I'm hearing the same from Councillor Melrose as well. And you have a suggestion? Go on.
If the committee agrees. So if you look at the framework, page 2, under service charges, non-management company, should we put a line, because obviously it says annual uplift fees, should we just put a line saying any that are uncapped will not be accepted? So if you look at,
where are you?
so if you look at page 2, so I know there's the table, it says adoption management company, public open spaces and service charges non-management company. Obviously there we talk about the cost of offer value for money and describe the annual uplift arrangements. Should we put any unfixed, like any unfixed ones would be not accepted, it must be a fixed uplift. So that's
A predetermined uplift linked to inflation type, that's what you're talking to.
Yes, so that's what I'm talking about. Yep. I think that would give reassurance to everyone else that we're not going to pick, and the uncapped risk that I think most people
that's a good amend, but I still think we need to make a clear note to this. It's not ideal. What concerns me here, I think, with due respect, Councillor Whiteman, I think you're after the perfect, and we've got to be careful we don't drive out the good. This is good, it's not perfect. And I'd rather we have this in place.
My concern here, Chair, is that kind of there are criteria that I would like us to be taking into account routinely. I'm not sure what's drafted requires us to take it into account. I don't have objection against an exceptional case being made, but I think it's kind of my problem at the moment is the current wording and the current sort of drafting of the framework, I think, kind of just encourages it to go to council, and it will always be, well, there's an urgent housing need, and I get that, but I think it kind of feels to me it's not robust enough at current in terms of enforcing many of these criteria. It's not perfection I'm after, and it's not having a complete blanket ban where we sort of tie our hands behind our back and, in a situation where there are exceptional circumstances, we are precluding ourselves as a council. But there is a kind of wish from me anyway that we at least sort of have a fairly robust set of criteria that we would need to justify departing from.
Let me then take the wording a little bit further, that this committee would not support the purchase of housing with uncapped charges, except in exceptional circumstances, something like that. And I think that needs to be sent a message to Cabinet. I don't think I'm having any particular problem with Cabinet either, but speaking on your behalf, Councillor Melrose, but I think we need to send a clear signal, and with Councillor Bode here on planning as well. he also has a role to play in this in terms of how we set up planning agreements, apparently. Councillor Harrison, I'm really reluctant to give him time.
Yeah, I realise hands are going up thick and fast, but it was just to include in the recommendation as well the point about we favour resident-led management companies as well. I think that's an important point.
Yeah, I think that's a good addition. Yes. Do you have enough in there to be able to give us a rough idea of what the note looks like?
Through you, Chair. Oh, sorry. Say that a bit better. Through you, Chair, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a note because you're making recommendations to Cabinet already. So you've got essentially 2, 3, 4 and 5. So in essence, what you're doing is, I'm trying to do in my head, is build those points into one of those recommendations which exists already because it's a point from Cabinet, or it's just an additional recommendation. And I think
let's take it as an additional recommendation.
And I think I've got enough that over the next couple of days we can refine that wording so that it comes back out as a recommendation from yourselves, bearing in mind this is a report going to Cabinet, and we'll be working with officers how to structure that report going to Cabinet as well.
Okay.
So I'm happy with that.
So we're talking about exceptional circumstances, we're talking about preference for management companies, and resident-led management companies. Sorry, resident-led management companies. Is it anything new, Councillor Whiteman? Because
yeah, sorry, Chair. The only other recommendation is if anything comes before council, the report ought to cover these issues off and ought to explain where we stand on the criteria, because we do, you know, sometimes see reports coming which just kind of perhaps don't cover these off in the detail. And at least it's about making an informed choice, isn't it? You know, we can sort of balance these things.
I think these do come to council anyway, I believe. So this is what the framework gives us.
Should I just explain? So if we adopt this framework, every time we have a Section 106 acquisition, each of these points in the framework have to be answered. So you will see what the uplift is, and you will see fixed, or you will see uncapped, or you will see, for example, the tenure mix. It will state it. It will state the wheelchair. So each of these questions, including infrastructure, which I know for Councillor Harrison, as I now live in his ward, that's a big one. So each of these, this sort of framework, there'll be an answer for each of these, because, and that way showing the framework is being used, and that will make us as councillors be able to make a decision on each acquisition, because each one always has to come to us councillors. And if we don't like it, we vote it down. And you all tell me, no, Jess, we reject that, and we reject the developer on that.
Okay, I'm going to propose then that we take forward 6 recommendations as outlined, plus a 7th. Sorry, Ms Hobbs,
I just had one last point that I needed to make, and it was just for Councillor. Just to say, housing need doesn't always take precedence. So I just wanted to state that as a fact. Obviously, it's a huge determinant, but we don't accept poor quality. We wouldn't accept high fees. We won't. There's still certain criteria that we have to accept. So I just wanted to make that really clear. That we don't want to put people into houses that they can't afford in perpetuity. That's definitely not something that we want to do.
Okay.
I understood. I think the real driver of this is ensuring that there are some criteria that perhaps aren't as prominent when the decision maker is deciding. It's just ensuring that all that information is there.
I think if the information is there, it will come to us as councillors at the end of the day, in whatever format, and we'll be able to see all that detail. That's essential. So what I'm going to propose again is items 1 to 6 recommendations plus an item 7, recommendation 7, along the lines I just outlined a couple of minutes ago. And what I'm also going to ask you is to allow me to have the delegated authority from you to agree with officers, with committee services and Mr Elkerton, etc., the wording of that recommendation 7 over the next couple of days. It's got to come to Cabinet on 22nd of July.
No, sorry, Chair, through you, that report is still to come to Cabinet, so it will be the September meeting.
Right. Whenever it comes to Cabinet, then. Yes, thank you. I don't know that anybody's particularly comfortable with it, but I don't, as I say, I think this is just about the best way forward. We are reassured it will come to Council. So on that basis, what I've just outlined, can I have a vote of all those in favour of that? Any against? No, I think it's a... Thank you, members. That was an interesting debate. Now, we have one item left, but I am advised by Mr. Leach on my left, he needs to make a point, quite an important point.
Yeah, through you, Chair, as set out in the Constitution, a formal break in the meeting is to be taken no less than 10 minutes after the end of 2.5 hours into the meeting, which you've now passed, at the conclusion of that item, which you just did, unless at least half of those present agree to continue. I leave it with you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Leach. So we have one item, which is item, which number is it? Item 4, I think it is, which is the work plan, which we normally take as the very first substantive item of the evening, but because of our visitors, I've moved it around. So, members, are you happy to continue just to wrap up that one item? All those, yes, I'm getting 1, 2, 3, 4, yes. Thank you, Mr. Leach. Good point. And let's move on to item 4, the work programme. Mr. Knight.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I actually turned my laptop off.
Sorry to catch you by surprise.
I forgot about item 4. The obviously work plan is taken as read. I think there is a proposal to move the report on the proposed resident engagement for large planned works from August to September to allow this to be presented alongside the engagement and communication strategy. That does make sense because when you're doing major works, key part of that is tenant engagement as part of the process, especially on things like high-rise blocks as well. We've also talked about today around fire safety as well, so I think that's something we need to pick up at Chair as part of the Chair's briefing and how we continue to monitor that moving forward, and then any other items or considerations for the work programme that members may want to consider or not.
I do have one question. We had the discussion on complaints, but actually the work programme here says we should have seen the annual complaints report. We've had the new... So that's going to have to come to the next meeting? Yeah. Okay, so that goes to August. Members, any other comments? Are you all too hot and exhausted at the end of 2 3/4 hours? I made the mistake of saying to Mr. Leach earlier on this evening we'd never gone past about 25 to 9. 10 to 9. Ooh. If there's no other comments, members, I will work with officers as usual on this, and what this needs to be proposed from the Chair. I'm going to propose the report from the Chair. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Bode. Let's see all those in favour of the work programme. Thank you, that's unanimous. Members, thank you.
Can I just mention one thing, Chair?
Yeah.
Just a reminder, there is HQN training this week.
Oh, you beat me too.
Sorry, Chair.
Yes. Members, thank you very much for your attendance. Officers, thank you. I think we all need to go and get a long, cool drink now. So I close the meeting at 10 to 9.